Meeting of the Minds event is about highlighting concerning topics in our community. What we try to do is bring panelists that can provide a compelling narrative and an audience that can also provide some great insight. And here you have his position of power with Donahue Peebles, the owner of the Peebles Corporation, which is the largest black real estate private equity firm in the world. And you have Thomas Moorehead, who owns hotels nationally and is the CEO and founder of Sterling Motor Cars, which is the only black-owned Rolls-Royce and Lamborghini dealership in the nation. And they're speaking about position of power and being trailblazers in the black community.
It's a real pleasure for us to be able to sponsor this event with Catalyst Network tonight. It's particularly important for City First Bank, who has really a legacy of economic empowerment as a leveler, particularly within the African American communities here in DC. So we're excited to be here, very happy to be a part of it.
It's great to be in Washington, D.C. It's my hometown, and to be here to support Catalyst, which we supported from the beginning. Fortunately, I got a good opportunity and went on to build a business that today is a $4 billion business. And it all started here in Washington, D.C., where I was encouraged to dream big. And I would say that the greatest responsibility that I have as a business person, especially one of color, is to let everybody know and let our young people know that all is possible. And if you're willing to work hard, prepare yourself, get educated, and get a little bit of luck, there's no limit to what you can accomplish.
I think it's important that people like Tom Moorehead and Don Peebles empower us with the knowledge that they've been given over all of these years. If we don't give back, once we get to these positions of power, we don't help those that are behind us.
Recently, we made history as the first ever black-owned real estate crowdfund in the country. And we raised on our IPO over $10 million in 1 week. This shows a true position of power, not for me, but for the crowd investors that I represent. When we all come together and invest together and control our own dollars, we can do amazing things.
And once again, we are thrilled to have had the opportunity to partner with the Catalyst Network Foundation for this meeting of the minds. This was amazing. We talked about generational wealth building. We talked about the pipeline from education to economic development. We talked about the crossroads with politics and with citizen engagement. And we talked about the importance of mentorship, professional development, choosing your next career, and really helping to lift others in the community.
And one of the best parts of this evening's event, A Position of Power, was talking about something transformative and something that's important to our organization. We work with Catalyst Network not only because we support them, but we're looking to transform the work that we do in the community, and we're actually wanting to partner.
I'm the CEO of City First Bank of DC, and we are extremely proud to be able to sponsor this event. And part of the reason for that, along with my colleague Dole Mitchell at Industrial, who we work closely with on a number of different things, is that we were founded and have continued to focus our efforts on economic empowerment, right? So we are an intermediary that focuses our lending on our community. The level of black average household wealth in Washington, D.C. is of white household wealth is 81 times that of African American households. 81 times, right? Now, of course, our speakers today will not have that problem. They've broken through. But I think this whole discussion and all of our interest is how do we close that gap? We were started about 20 years ago with about only 9.4 million in equity. We have turned that around into 1.2 billion in investment in the community. And again, all to that end. So I'm very, very happy to be here. I'm very excited to hear our speakers and learn from them. You're in for a treat. And again, thank you, and happy to be here.
I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate the opportunity to be here amongst so many legends and greats in the real estate industry and what we call the real estate game. What I am representing as a CEO, founder, and fund manager of the Tulsa Real Estate Fund, which launched on June 1st. Our name of our company is called Tulsa in memory and in homage of the legendary community of Tulsa, Oklahoma of Black Wall Street that was massacred and bombed on June 1st of 1921. So we just experienced history. Many of you may not know it yet. We're working on Black Enterprise covering it now. Many of you may not know it yet, but we actually had not just Black history, but American history happen on June 1st of 2018 this year. Leveraging President Obama's legislation of the Jobs Act, we have created the first ever in the history of this country 100% Black-owned real estate crowd fund called the Tulsa Real Estate Fund. Not only after 2.5 years of due diligence, research, and development to pull this off, did we launch the fund on June 1st and raise millions in 24 hours and $10.1 million in 1 week in this legendary fund, but we did it without major institutional investors. Our highest investment was $40,000. The average investment, $1,100 of 9,145 of my co-founders, partners, and crowd members. Some are here in the crowd, because some stopped me today. Any Tulsa members in the crowd? She's a shareholder. So we got more to get now. So what we did, what was legendary, is that our fund is focused on revitalizing that Black Wall Street spirit within us of group economics. We've proven that the crowd itself can raise $10 million in a week. It's not something that I did or my team did, something that we did, our community did.
It does. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the wonderful opportunity to introduce to you Thomas A. Moorehead. Thomas A. Moorehead is the owner of Sterling Motor Cars in Northern Virginia, and he is a veteran of the automotive industry. The most important thing for Thomas Moorehead has been creating opportunities for people of color to be successful in all endeavors. Mr. Thomas Moorehead.
One thing with Don Peebles, he's an executive for the Peebles Corporation, and one, he's leading a lot of the DC initiatives and efforts. And then two, so the Peebles Corporation is personal. They're our nonprofit's biggest supporter, both financially and then just across the board. When we do corporate tours, Peebles Corporation always allows our fellows to do corporate tours in the DC, New York office. DP3, he's spoken at so we do youth STEM initiatives. So he's spoken at our youth STEM initiative we held at Benjamin Banneker in New York, hosted, sponsored by Goldman Sachs and LinkedIn. It was over 600 students, so he was one of the keynotes for that. And then also he spoke on a meeting of the minds last year, and then the one that we did 2 days ago in New York City. So I just want to highlight that and highlight the brother Don Peebles III.
Well, first of all, Laurel, thank you so much for the opportunity, and it's great to see so many friendly faces in the crowd. Now, what Laurel didn't tell you is that when I walked out that elevator right there, he said, "Hey, Don, you'll be introducing your father, so think of something nice to say." So I sat there for a second and I said, well, there's so much I could talk about. And I can recite his career backwards and forwards. I can start in the middle and stop again. And I know that because he made me read the Peebles Principles, his first book, 15 times. It's about right, isn't it? So then I was sitting over there and I was talking to Tim, who gave the great introduction to Mr. Moorehead. And Tim was talking about the importance of mentorship. And I realized that I had perhaps one of the luckiest circumstances in the world, because my mentor is one of the most accomplished and prestigious individuals in the industry that I care so much about. And he was a teacher not just in business, but in life. And as I look out and see all these friendly faces, I know that y'all are familiar with his career, but not necessarily as familiar with Don Peebles, the man. And as we talk about success being a collection of small sacrifices, I can assure you that my father never missed a basketball game. He never missed a basketball practice or an opportunity to tell me that that was a bad turnover or I missed a defensive rotation. He told me and he taught me just as much with his words as with his actions. And for so often you think of teachers as somebody who just set a good example, but he was somebody who showed me that example and then made sure to correct me every step of the way. And so it's with great honor and pleasure that I introduce my father, most important figure in my life, Don Peebles.
Can each of you tell your story of how it all started and then your very first deal?
Well, I thought perhaps what I would do is just come and sit and listen at the group, because Tim did such a great job. My mother certainly would be very proud. But let me just say this. It is truly an honor to be here today. As Don's son said, when I look out, I see so many friendly faces, and certainly some of those that we had an opportunity to touch in some ways, and I truly hope that they're here today to share their stories with you so you have an opportunity to learn about some of the things they've done. I was very fortunate to have a fraternity brother very early on who pulled me in one day and just said, you know, I've looked at you over the years and I really think you have an opportunity to get into the car business. But it was at that time that I was a couple of courses short of that PhD and felt like I couldn't go home if I didn't complete it, and I turned it down. But after 10 sessions with him, he finally convinced me by telling me one day that if I came in and had an opportunity to learn the car business, that I would be a millionaire in 5 years. That's really what made my ears perk up and got me started. But true to his insistence upon my taking that step, I had to give up at PhD. I had to step back because he said to me that I probably wouldn't make enough money doing that, and he was right. But what he said was that, let me teach you. And I said, well, what can I do? What department can I manage for you? He said, you can't manage what you don't know. So he started me off selling cars. I sold cars for a year. Everybody at the University of Michigan thought something was wrong, and that perhaps I had gotten to a point where I'd lost my mind to give up everything to start selling cars. But it was that process that taught me so much about the business. And at the end of a year, I went to him and said, I am ready to get into the program to be an automobile owner. And he said, I don't think you're ready yet. Let's try it one more year. And what he wanted me to do was to go into other areas in the dealership. And in the course of doing that, he gave me a rag and put me in the parts department. I had to stock shells, dust shares. I had to do everything. From that, I went out and started selling on the service drive. I stood on my feet for 14 hours a day, selling service on the service drive. But what he was really trying to do was to say, I want you to learn every aspect of the car business. If you do, no one can hold you hostage. You can tell anyone in your store that you're going to let them go and you can take over their job and the organization will still go on. So I say all of that to say that's how I got started. Now, there are some of you who may not want to take that route, but I truly want you to understand that if you're going to get the game, you really have to put in the hard work to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Don, same question for you.
Yeah, first, I want to thank my son, Donahue, for a wonderful introduction. He always inspires me and gives me a sense of pride, and so I want to thank him. And also, I'm sure his mother's very proud, who's here as well. You know, I grew up in Washington, D.C., so I started off by being lucky. I was born in 1960 in Washington, D.C., and Washington, D.C. in 1960 was a totally different place. So my mother could have me in one private hospital in this city, and that was Freeman's Hospital, which is now Howard University Hospital. She couldn't have me at GW, couldn't have me at Georgetown, couldn't have me at Sibley or anyplace else. And so during that time period, Washington, D.C. changed. I remember the riots of '68, and I also remember 1974 when the city got the right to elect its own government for the first time. And then in 1978 when it elected a mayor that ended up transforming the city. And so as a young boy, I can remember going downtown in D.C. and beginning to see these buildings getting built. And my mother was a real estate sales agent and then a broker and then worked at Fannie Mae. So she raised me by herself. And so I was introduced to real estate. So I remember taking the bus down D.C. This is before Metro was built and while Metro was under construction. And I remember seeing all these buildings get built, and I remember seeing a couple names on them. And one in particular was Oliver T. Carr Company. And it's Oliver T. Carr Company. Everywhere I went downtown, it's Oliver T. Carr Company. And so I said, wow, this would be amazing. To build one of these buildings would be phenomenal. And I remember a few years later, and the mayor of the city, soon-to-be mayor, city council member, Marion Barry, who was a mentor of mine, I met Oliver T. Carr. He wore a bow tie, sport jacket, walked on two legs, walked on the ground, and he was a man just like anybody else. And so I said, okay, well, he can do it, so can I. I happened to be born in D.C. where I had examples of African-American entrepreneurs and business people and lawyers and doctors and so forth to be very, very successful. I spent my last 2 years of high school. I was a page on Capitol Hill, so I went to the high school on the top floor of the Library of Congress and went to school from 6 in the morning until 10:30, and then walked across the street to the Capitol and worked. So there I got to meet many African-American members of Congress, John Conyers, Ron Dellums, Harold Ford, Charlie Rangel, and so many others, and they mentored me. And so I saw that there were really kind of no limitations to what could be done. However, I wanted to play it safe. I saw my mother struggling, and so I wanted to earn a nice living. I wanted to one day get married, have kids, and be able to support them. So I said, okay, I'm going to do what I know. I had an uncle who was a inspiration to me, and he was a doctor. So I said, I'm going to go into medicine. So I entered into a 6-year medical program at Rutgers University. And then after the first year, I decided this wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't have the patience, frankly, to wait that long. My goal was to be successful and be doing it at an early age where I could get a good runway and a long runway. So I quit. End of the first year, I quit, came back to D.C. in 1979 and decided to sell houses. But interest rates were 20%. Carter was president, and it was impossible to get anybody to qualify. I could sell houses, but I couldn't get anybody to qualify. So I was a good salesperson. So I said, okay, I got to earn a living. So I started learning how to become an appraiser. And I became an appraiser, and my first client was the federal government, Department of Housing and Urban Development. This is in 1983. I was 23. And I started appraising low-income housing for HUD-insured mortgages around Washington, D.C. And so it took me all around the city to do that. And so that's where I started off. So appraising houses at $125 an appraisal. First, it started off at $60, but then HUD per appraisal. Then HUD raised it to $125 an appraisal. So you had to do a lot of appraisals to make any kind of living. And so I did that. And then I got appointed to the Property Tax Appeal Board by the mayor when I was 23. And then 24, I became chairman. So all the major property owners came before the board appealing their assessments before this board. So I was 24 years old. I was chairman of the most powerful board in Washington, D.C., thanks to a transformative African-American mayor who gave me a chance. And so anyway, I go in my business. I said, I want to have the biggest appraisal business I can possibly have. And so I opened up offices in Georgetown, and I took more space than I needed because I said we're going to grow into it. So I sublet some to some real estate brokers. So I was trying to get into the development business, looking at different stuff downtown. And one day, since 1986, a member of the tax appeal board, who was also a broker, who was one of my subtenants, came in and said, here, I got a piece of property I got listed in Anacostia on Martin Luther King Avenue, and you should buy it. I said, man, I don't want to own anything in Anacostia. I want to build downtown. I want to be a big developer, like Oliver Carr. And he showed me a letter. And the letter said this, it was on the letterhead of the mayor of the District of Columbia. And it said, this letter constitutes a commitment by the District of Columbia government to lease office space in a building that you propose building. And it was addressed to another developer. And so my friend told me, the broker said, look, you can buy this for the lot for $900,000. This developer's offering $750,000. I went so they're arguing over $150,000. And I'm thinking they're going to build a building here, 22,000 square feet or so. So I checked out the zoning and found out I could build a 100,000 square foot building. So I said, okay. I went and set up a meeting with the seller. I had the broker set it up. And I said, I'm going to pay your price. I brought in some partners. I'm going to pay you your price. And I need time to make the deal. And I brought in 3 partners who collectively put up all the money. And we split 50-50. And I put up no money. They put up all of it. And then I went to work. And I wrote the city a letter saying that now I own the building. And I know that the mayor was committed to economic empowerment east of the river. So I'm going to build a bigger building. And I'm going to charge you less money per square foot, but it's going to be a much bigger building, and it's going to transform the neighborhood, and so on. So ultimately, the mayor and the city signed a lease to lease the building at 2100 Martin Luther King Avenue. And right after that, right before that lease was signed, I got a call from the Washington Post. And I returned the call. And, I thought it was a human interest story. Young African-American entrepreneur does well, rebuilding our communities. And it turned out it was an investigative reporter for the Washington Post. And he said, I'm looking into the relationship that you and the mayor have and want to understand why he's leasing office space from you in Anacostia. And so a long story short, I was on the front page a few days later, top fold of the paper, right next to Ronald Reagan and the Iran-Contra affair. And there was my little building in Anacostia. And so ultimately, we signed the lease, built the building a year early, $900,000 under budget. And I still own the building today. The city has released it 2 times thereafter. And Donahue is overseeing the renovation of the building right now because the Bowser administration renewed their lease. They kickstarted the revitalization of Anacostia, which continues today. That building made me a multimillionaire. That building, I think, back then cost about $9-10 million. And today I run a $4 billion business, but it all started right there, and I wouldn't be sitting up here today if it weren't for that building, and if it weren't for Marion Barry, and it wasn't for being born in Washington, D.C.
Wow. Two amazing stories. And within both of your stories, you touched on mentoring. We would love to know if you guys can talk more about the importance of mentorship and some best practices of putting yourself out there to find a mentor.
I think I'll move mine, and I'm going to fast forward it to my time when I came here. I've been in the car business now. Well, actually, I'm in the car business as well as the hospitality business. My wife primarily runs the hospitality side, so if I take credit for her success, she'll hear about it. So I don't want to do that, but no, we both do it together, which has really been a great relationship. But what I will say is I've been in the car business now 36 years. This is the start of my 36th year. And that's a long time for somebody who started at 40 years of age. So I guess if you do the math, fast forward, but you can see that I'm getting to that after-dinner drink stage of life. But one of the things that I did when I came, I went to Turner Construction because I wanted to build a BMW store here in this area. And it was going to be a new store. BMW had not given a new point to a person of color ever. And they certainly hadn't given one to anyone here in this area. So they did a study, and that study said that they could put 3 stores, one in California, one in Atlanta, and certainly one here in Washington, D.C. So when I walked in here, first thing I had to do was to try and get and establish a relationship with some financial institutions here in the area. I had some money when I came here because of my stores that I started out in Nebraska and also in Illinois. But I walked into, and I'll say that I don't see him here today, but Industrial Bank. And I will say this. There was a young man by the name of Doyle Mitchell, from Industrial Bank, who was one of those who understood what I wanted to do. Gave me a very small loan that helped me to get started here in this market. But there was also a bank that I went to over in Baltimore, and I told a young man over there that I wanted to build a BMW store, and he told me that he couldn't give me any money because he had a bad experience with a young man who tried to do a business with Nehru jackets. And that let me know that he didn't understand sheer economics than the difference between BMWs and Nehru jackets. But that was what I ran into in terms of being in this area. But fast forward that to walking into Turner Construction when I got ready to do the business here. And I looked around in the room and I saw all of the great buildings that Turner had been building. And I said to them at that time, I said, in order to do work for me, I have to have diversity in my operation. And he said, okay, we understand. So we had another appointment. The next time I walked in there, he had two young men that looked like me that was sitting there. One was Kappa, the other one was a Q. They were from North Carolina A&T. And those young fellas had never done a project of any size, but in order to adhere to my sense of diversity, they put them on in what they call special projects. And I will say this, they did an outstanding job in building my first store. When they built my BMW store, by the time I got ready to build my next store, it was time for the young man that built my first store to move on. And I said to him that I wanted to write a letter to the head of Turner Construction to say that he had done an outstanding job. So give me the name of the president. And he said, Mr. Moorehead, if I give you the name of the president, he would never get to the letter. If you would send it to my supervisor, okay, he would get it. I said, that's okay, young man. Just let me have the name of the president. I sent that to the president who was down in Texas. The letter filtered all the way back to this area. And as a result of that, that young man today is heading one of the biggest projects down in the Atlanta area and doing a really great job. But I tell that story primarily because of what I call mentorship at another level, and that was when I got ready to build my next store, I grabbed another young man, and he's sitting here today. This young man not only built my new BMW store, that's about 100,000 square feet, that services about 150 BMWs a day. He also built my Rolls-Royce store that is also selling Rolls Royces in this market, which was something I thought I could never get. And when I tried getting a Rolls Royce store many, many years ago, they wouldn't give me one. So they ended up giving to another dealer here in the marketplace who really didn't perform very well. And as time went on, they came back to me, and we've been very blessed that we have been able to get that organization going. So I was looking to do another store, and my next store that I wanted to do was a Lamborghini store. I called on the same young man to build my Lamborghini store, and he too did another great job and built my Lamborghini store. The next store that I did was a McLaren store, and he did another great job when I called on him to do McLaren. By having an opportunity to start with that young man, and he's here today. His name is Bronson Cooper. I'd like to have Bronson Cooper stand up. The one thing I will say about Bronson was every time he walked into someone's office with his portfolio and said to him that he was building something for BMW, Mini Cooper, Harley Davidson, McLaren, Lamborghini, they gave him opportunities because they say if you can work for those kind of companies, you can certainly do business for us. That's what I call true mentorship. Every time I've needed goods and services, I wanted somebody who looked like me. And what I say to all of you, for those of you who are out there, and especially those that know me, the best way for us to help each other is to reach back and bring someone else that looks like you, bring them along. The young man who helped me was a fraternity brother, got me started in the business. And I said to him one day, I said, Mr. B, his name was James Bradley, how do I ever repay you for what you've done for me? And he said, young man, I just want you to reach back, and as a part of that black tax, I want you to reach back and take someone else, male or female, that looked like you and bring them along as well. So I say to all of you, for me, that's what I call mentorship, paying it forward, working. When I look at all of the individuals that work for us, I think we have now pretty close to about 1,300 employees. But on the automotive side, you know, I have an opportunity to have individuals who look like me that are now doing some extraordinary jobs. And those jobs are allowing them to have an opportunity. Since I started, I have actually gotten 4 of the individuals who have now become dealers. I chair our national association. I've chaired it for about 3 or 4 years. And the biggest job that we've had is trying to convince the manufacturers to assist us in getting opportunities to not just be the first African-American to own a Rolls-Royce franchise, which I will say there's 122 Rolls-Royce dealers in the world, and I'm the only one that looks like you and I. There are 23 McLaren dealers in the world, and I'm the only one that looks like you and I. There are 34 Lamborghini dealers in the North America, which is Canada, U.S., Mexico, and South America. And I'm the only one on that side of the table as well. But the thing that I am trying to do right now is to make sure, as I continue on with the after-dinner drink stage of life, that when I walk out of the door, there are others who look like me that are also on the luxury side and the exotic side of this business world that we call the car business. So, thank you.
Thank you. So we talked about entrepreneurship, and I actually had a chance to hear Bronson's story earlier as well. And there are some aspiring entrepreneurs as well as established entrepreneurs in here. So next question is, what has changed in the last 10 to 20 years for entrepreneurs? The difference of starting a business 20 years ago compared to now, and then what are some of the challenges that entrepreneurs face today?
You know, I would think, look, I'd like to go back. I think 20 years is probably too short. I'd go back 30 or so. So this is something that's kind of been on my mind for the last 2 weeks. So 2 weeks ago, my wife and I were in San Francisco attending the Forbes 400 Summit on Philanthropy. So Forbes magazine does their Forbes 400 list of the richest Americans. And so and the ones that are the most philanthropic, we gather each year for a summit on how to give their money away. So Katrina and I have been doing this for 5 years now. So you have Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, et cetera. And so I was looking at how you have my generation. I'm a baby boomer. I'm kind of at the latter part of baby boomers. So my generation, you've got Gates, who's a few years older than me, but basically my age zone, Jeff Bezos, et cetera. And Warren, who's 88, almost 89, he's a outlier for sure. He is the most healthiest guy, healthier than I am, and he's 88 years old. But so you look at that and you see all the wealth in, say, my generation space. But then you look at Sergey Brin. You look at Mark Zuckerberg. You look at Sean Parker, or Steve Jobs' widow, and you look at that younger generation, and they're already super wealthy, and they're going to be even wealthier. Then I started looking at my peers as African American entrepreneurs, and so you've got, you got Robert Smith, you got Oprah, you got Tom, you got Bob Johnson, you got so there's this zone of us in that space. But you look at the generation that's the millennials or a little beyond that, the Zuckerberg counterparts, and you can't really, there's not the presence there. And so I asked myself, why is that? And so I think back about civil rights again, and I think about political leadership. And so I got a chance, as I mentioned, to spend my last couple years of high school around people like, Conyers, John Lewis, Jesse Jackson, Barry, and so forth. And the stories that they told things were so unacceptable when they were young that they fought and they protested to improve the rights of our people, to open up the doors of opportunity. And that when they were being beaten, in Selma or in Birmingham or the like, and they were imprisoned, they said, okay, you know what? We're going to get there. And when we get there, we're going to change things. It's going to be different. And so you look at what happened. Maynard Jackson became mayor of Atlanta. And so Maynard Jackson becomes the first African-American mayor of Atlanta, and the state and the county, Fulton County, want to expand the airport to make it a global, Hartsfield Airport to be a global airport, international airport. So they have multi-billion-dollar expansion. And they say, we're going to do this and so forth. Maynard Jackson says, well, we want to see 35% minority contracting on the airport. And the state and county government say, no way. Well, he says, okay, well, then you're not going to be the building. They said, well, why? He said, because the city of Atlanta issues the building permits because it's in the city of Atlanta, and I will refuse to issue the building permits. Long and the short of it is that transformed Atlanta. And today that airport is appropriately named Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, but he created a black business community in Atlanta. Marion Barry, who protested and marched and fought and went to prison. I remember one day we were at the pool in the Caribbean, and I saw all these marks on his legs. And he told me that those were from him getting whacked and knocked off his feet by billy clubs. And so he came into office, and his whole agenda was to change the plight of African Americans economically. And so he created the black business class and the environment for the black business class to prosper here. I got to be one of the beneficiaries of that, and Bob Johnson was awarded the cable television franchise for Washington, D.C. He and TCI, his partner, which was the primary investor in BET, they were awarded the cable television franchise by Marion Barry. And so Bob may not like me saying this, but his pathway to success, just like mine, has been paved by Marion Barry and by black economic power. And you can go on, and you can look at Chicago, and you can see a powerful black business class, and you can see a powerful black financial services industry. Ariel Capital with John Rogers, Loop Capital with Jim Reynolds. And you can go on in Chicago. And that's because of Harold Washington. And that African Americans there fought for economic empowerment. And then you can look at the place I call my part-time home, and I say part-time because I'm technically a Florida resident, but where there's zero income tax. But you look at New York, and you don't see a strong black business class because they have one black mayor. He was a soft-spoken mayor who got 4 years and out. And so fast forward today, there is no Marion Barry in the United States, in any major city. There is no Harold Washington. There is no Maynard Jackson. There's no Coleman Young. And by the way, Detroit, the automobile industry's manufacturing industry's headquarters, Michigan has more Black Enterprise 100 businesses than any place else in the country because, again, what was expected is fairness and equitable treatment. And so today, what's missing is there's not the political engagement. And as a result, because what happened is after us, and after that, or after the Barrys and so forth, and desegregation, we no longer were forced to go to historically black colleges, and so therefore we started going elsewhere as well. We didn't have to create our own businesses because now IBM and General Motors and Lehman Brothers and American Express will hire us. And so we lost the entrepreneurial spirit. We don't have the same commitment because things are a little bit better. And so we're not engaged and we're not challenging the system. And I can tell you from traveling, I do business in 7 different cities. There's no place like DC. I mean, closest thing like it is Atlanta. And I think the closest thing, frankly, that we're going to see to a Marion Barry anywhere in the country is Muriel Bowser, I think. I think there's the mayor we have here today is being more transformative. But the reason why we're not making the same kind, we don't have that next generation, is we're not as engaged. And that's the challenge. And I mean, that's the challenge for all of you all. You know, you think about this for a second, and then we can move on to another topic. But New York City is 67% minority, 67%. It has the 3rd largest public pension system on the planet with over $250 billion in assets. And by the way, the city's 54% female. Less than 2% of their funds are managed by minority or women-owned asset managers. 2% out of a majority of the city. So think about, so if we don't get in, and by the way, what happens is those asset managers, they deploy capital. They deploy capital to, hedge funds. They deploy capital to tech companies. And I was with a tech company the other day who's looking for capital. And they were saying how they got a great idea, but they can't find any capital. And I was thinking about how many stupid ideas that are come up with by white, tech guys that never get anywhere. They get $100 million. And how a black business with a great idea can't get a dime. But that's on us. So I think that the challenge is that we got to do something about that by getting engaged and having an expectation that economic opportunities are reflective of the diversity of the communities. And so as a company, with the $4 billion of our active developments, every one of them reflects the economic opportunities. The contractors, the consultants, and so forth reflect the diversity of the communities. And so as a company, we will award on those $4 billion of projects, we will award at least $1.5 billion of that money to minority-owned businesses, primarily African-American-owned businesses. But that is not going to be enough without us all getting engaged.
Thank you.
You know, now that Don has certainly touched on this, I just want to amplify just a little bit. You know, there are so many opportunities out here. And for many of you who are out here this evening, you want to do things. You want to start your own business, but it's access to capital. When we've had 9 really great years in the automobile industry, unprecedented. But what we're now starting to see is a slight downturn and a tightening. We also are seeing that interest rates are starting to rise, and that's certainly going to hurt us all. Access to capital, I'm sure all of you feel this, is the hardest thing to get. you have great ideas, but it's extremely hard to get your foot in the door, okay, because of lack of funds. One of the things that I would suggest that you do is we have to start working together. There are some hedge fund guys out here now, and I really say that they're probably 17, and Don knows most of them as well, that are really super guys. They have gone and worked very hard, and I guess maybe I'll ask the question, does anybody know who the richest African American is in this country? Outstanding. You know, sometimes when I ask that question, they tell me Oprah rather. I love my sister. She is absolutely wonderful. But Robert actually manages $31 billion with a big B in assets. Now, you know, you manage those kind of dollars, you get 2% of everything that you manage, and you get 20% on the return on those assets. So if you imagine the kind of money he's making, I think right now, currently, I think he's about $4.7 billion is what he's worth right now. But again, there are so many companies out there, so many municipalities out there with money, pension fund dollars, that we are having problems just touching. But that is a space and an area where if you can really get in to some of those dollars. Now, when we look at the hospitality side, one of the things that we did when we started out, I was fortunate, and I'll say this, I got lucky because my next door neighbor happened to be the president of Marriott, who really would see me every morning getting up, running, trying to sell one car every day. And he said to me, you know, you need to look at the hospitality business. You and Joyce can make money in something other than the car business. And I said to him at that time, I said, Bob, that's all I think I know. But if you can convince Joyce, my wife, to go sit through those seminars, and he did, that's what got us into hospitality. And I'm sure John will tell you this. That is an area that many of you could get into and can really, truly make money. And I say that because one of the things that you can do with that is let the brand manage those hotels for you. If you put together a group of you and come up with the fund to invest in them by using a combination of institutional funds as well as the funds that you put together, okay, that will allow you to get into NABHood, which is the minority group of hotel owners in America today. Look at some opportunities of working together, because I think that is the real key for us. For all of you who are here today, just like I did with Bronson and all of the guys that we have actually helped along the way, we have got to start working together. One of the things that happens in my stores is that if I lose an Asian employee that's on the sales side of my organization, I really would have an opportunity to say, why did we drop this month? Or why did we drop the last quarter? And we dropped primarily because they only shop each other. For us, what happens is we'll say, well, I just happened to see the car over here and it's a great car and I just bought it. But how many of those individuals out there in those other stores are going to help move to that next level? So think about working together and help each other, because that's going to help all of us pay that black tax and all of us will rise.
Thank you. So I want to touch on Marionberry and how he played an integral role in your success, and how you talked about 20, 30 years ago, we had politicians that we could lock arms with. In this day and age, and with the political climate that we do have, should the black or brown company affiliate, support the politicians like you did 30 years ago, like we know the large corporations are doing today?
Yeah, I think, look, first of all, you got to think about what the challenge is in anything in life where we're trying to propel ourselves to greater success, and that is getting somebody to believe in us, getting a chance, getting an opportunity. If we get an opportunity, the chances are, highly likely that we're going to be successful at it. So, but it's getting that opportunity, whether it be access to capital, whether it be, and by the way, you mentioned Robert Smith. So Robert Smith also happens to have the best performing fund in the world in technology. He performs every year better than everyone else. And interestingly enough, I gave Robert the I was chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Board, and I gave Robert the Chairman's Award 2 years ago, the last year that President Obama was in office. And I was at a board meeting, and I was saying who my choice was, because I got to make that choice, who it was going to be. And there were members of Congress, African-American members of Congress, who didn't even know who he was. So I had to educate them as to who he was. And they thought Oprah was the wealthiest African-American as well. Getting the opportunity, that's really the challenge. And so for me, again, I say I was lucky. I was lucky to be born here, lucky to be born at a time where we had come off of a civil rights movement, so where there was a consciousness that there was a need to knock down barriers, and there was a group of people that became politically empowered that were committed because they had gone through things that were unthinkable. And so they had a purpose. Say what you want about Marion Barry, no one ever accused him of taking money or trying to take a bribe or to do something for himself. It was all about being transformative. Same thing with Maynard, same thing with Coleman Young, same thing with Harold Washington, same thing with Dutch Morial. They were about purpose. So who else? You think about this. I was appointed to the Property Tax Appeal Board at 23. No college education, limited real estate appraisal experience, mainly a residential appraiser. And then who would make that 24-year-old after the first year of being a member of the board chairman? And then who would entrust a 26-year-old to build a major office building who had never built a building before? And every time Barry gave me an opportunity, he said, "Don't let me down." And finally, we got to the point, he said, "I know you're going to do a great job, go at it." But it was giving me the opportunity, and because it was what he felt his purpose was. Now, let's look at the mayors that followed him. All wonderful people, and I probably shouldn't say that because it reminds me of what the president says about people. But, I genuinely mean it. They're all kind of nice people. But not one of them had a great purpose. Think about it. So gentrifying D.C., is that a purpose that's really good for us? Balancing the budget, is that really what we're about? So no great purpose. So politics is the control. If you're playing football, there are rules to the game, and the referees enforce the rules, and the rules committee sets them. So politics is the rules committee and the referees. And so they can say a first down, they can call where you mark the ball and so many other places. And so the fact that we're not attracting people into politics who have a greater purpose, that is, I believe, one of the biggest challenges. And I think that was the difference of people in that other era. And that's why I think we've got to turn the page and look elsewhere. Thomas was saying, is access to capital. No business gets started without money. And the banks are major global banks now. Most business ideas get funded by private equity, and yet there are so few people of color in that space, and then they're afraid to make any mistakes, because if they make a mistake, they won't get another opportunity. Where somebody else can say, "Oh, yeah, we lost $100 million here, but we ended up doing well somewhere else," et cetera. So it's getting the opportunity. But again, I say that it means that everybody else has to start thinking about how we do that. And by the way, change doesn't come without confrontation. I mean, we talk about the hospitality industry. I built, several hotels, including what's considered the first major hotel in the United States owned by an African American. I built the Royal Palm in South Beach. And so that opportunity came from two places. One, it came because the NAACP started a tourism boycott of Miami-Dade County because they had disrespected Nelson Mandela when he came out of prison and was traveling around the world, and because he stopped in Cuba and said hello to Castro for saying nice things and supporting words of him while he was in prison. The Cuban Americans protested when he came to Miami, took the key to the city away from him, and then there was a tourism boycott led by the NAACP that created the opportunity for me to develop the Royal Palm. And the NAACP under President Mfume, they started an economic reciprocity program where they did a study back in the 1990s that showed that African Americans were spending $35 billion a year in the tourism industry, and none of us were owning any hotels. And so they graded all of the hotels, Marriott included. Marriott got a C, everybody else got an F, and that started the search for diversity within the hospitality industry. And that's why the hospitality industry to this day is looking for diversity among owners, and many of you all should look at doing that. But that came from a challenge. And so the same thing here is be challenging your elected officials. Why aren't you doing more for doing contracts with minority-owned businesses? Why aren't you insisting that companies that come into these cities do business with the businesses that are reflective of the population? I mean, it's got to be a commitment for all of us. And of course, we should do business with each other. We should go out of our way to do business with each other. We should look to mentor other people, and we should always have time for each other as well. And so, I mean, that's kind of the perspective I have in terms of, where we get engaged.
Okay, thank you.
Just stop and take the time, as he said. I just want to say this. We have a hotel at 92nd and Collins, and it was primarily because of you, okay? I didn't believe, in Miami that is, I didn't believe, first of all, we could get down there. Look at what he did, gave us an opportunity to take a look, and we now have one that's at 92nd and Collins, and it's because of you, so thank you.
Thank you. So we heard earlier from Jay Morrison. He came up here, talked about his Tulsa fund and how he was able to raise $11 million in capital in I think 10 million in 11 days. But at the end of his message, he talked about giving back to the black community. He said going out to New York, Chicago, D.C., and giving back to those communities. So question I pose to you all is, what do you think the most pressing issues are right now in our black and brown communities, and how can people that are in a position of power help those communities?
Well, for me, my wife and I have looked at it from the standpoint of education. When we started our foundation, we couldn't give to every cause, but one of the things that was dear to us was education. As a result of that, we chose to give back and help young people. And what we started to look at was a gap fund, and that is, say, everybody gets scholarships when they first get out of high school. They can go out and get them to get started. But it's the young men and women who are coming along between their junior and senior year, and they now have a debt that they can't pay and they can't graduate. So what we started doing was looking at those gap funds that were needed to keep kids in school, to not have to stop and go get a job and may not ever go back. So what we started doing was providing grants to those individuals to keep them in school so they would continue to get that education. Right now, we are no longer a priority in this country. As a result of that, it's really going to take all of us to be the best that we can do and help each other to keep moving to that next level. So that's why I think helping each other, doing the things that they're doing, giving back in our community, helping to educate those of us who are coming along right now to be able to compete is what I see as being the most important thing for us.
Thank you.
By the way, and I admire all that he and Joyce have done in that space. I mean, they are doing some transformative things in education. And of course, all of us, I think, can look at our success or what we've accomplished to date, and it's deeply rooted in education and the challenges of how to get that education and how to pay for it. So for us, and for me, and for my family, we have a few core commitments in terms of what we think are the most pressing educational opportunities. I mean, that is critical. And as a result, we build a school in every city we do business in. Wow. And we build a school we build the best school providing a private education to the lowest income kids in the communities of whatever city we do. And we're a luxury-oriented developer, so we go into the communities and build schools. So, for example, we have helped start, and my wife is on the board of the school, and we have funded a significant portion of a school called Care Elementary School in Miami, in Overtown. It's the poorest neighborhood in the area, and it's an elementary school, K through 6. And we took 6 in as well. And it's a private school funded with private dollars and vouchers. And 13 kids to a class with a teacher and a teacher's assistant, all with iPads, smart boards, and the whole bit. And many of the kids are homeless. So wherever they end up going, they come back, wherever their families are moved to a shelter or the like, they come back to that school every day. They're provided breakfast, lunch, and a snack before they leave, and they're getting an education just as good as my daughter gets, where I pay $50-something thousand a year for her to go in New York City. So we're doing that there. And the other thing is, the other challenge is economic opportunity. And so we, here in DC, supported the Hospitality High School, and then our company created an entrepreneurial academy within that school, because it's not just important to teach our young people how to work in the hospitality industry. We want them to become owners like us. And so to teach them entrepreneurship at an early age, because they need to be exposed to it. And so we are doing that in California. We're doing that in, we're going to do another one here in DC, an entrepreneurial academy, and also in Boston and many other places. So it's a commitment to education. So those are the two. If you look at criminal justice, for example, is another area of importance to me, a fairness in a criminal justice system that treats everybody fairly. But if we can deal with education and economics, they run hand in hand, because the parents need to be able to be employed to support their kids pursuing education, and their kids need to see economic opportunity in the future to inspire them. And so I believe that those are the two most pressing issues that are confronting us today.
Thank you. So we have time for one more pre-selected question before Laurel is going to get some questions from the audience. Two-part question. We talked about raising capital today. We also talked about finding some good deals. So that's the question. What are the best methods of raising capital, and how do you assess a good deal?
Let me say this. As we all venture out, go into business, I can walk through, I want you to be able to develop a skill set that allows you to walk through a particular business, certainly one that you, and for us, hospitality and the automotive side are great ways that I think that we can make money. And it's been proven that we've been fairly lucky at doing so. But to be able to walk through a business and to look at, in the case of an automotive side, the number of stalls that's there, the number of technicians they have, what each one of those stalls represent, to be able to look at what they're selling. By the time I walk through there and walk out the back door, I can tell you how much that store will actually generate, how much they're doing on an annual basis, and how much they make a month. That's what you have to do to understand your craft. every business person in here, everyone who would like to be in business, what I'd say to you is there are certain metrics that you have to look at. There are certain guidelines for profitability that you have to look at. You cannot allow your percent guidelines to get off plus or minus, okay, if you're going to have a successful operation. If someone is looking to buy your operation, they're going to look at your business and look at whether or not you're running it effectively and efficiently to the degree that it makes money. If they're going to pay you the multiples that you deserve for all of your hard work, you have to remember that you're not running a social service agency, you're running a business. The other thing is that sometimes hiring your relatives is not a great thing, okay? And in fact, sometimes it's better to even pay your relative not to show up.
Preach.
What you really want to do, because of every dollar that you make, okay, you want to get a return on that investment. Because if you get that return, it allows you to move to the next level. Don't fall in love with it and stay in business too long, okay, with that asset. Look at what's the right time for you to dispose of that asset and get the maximum dollars for it. Then what will it allow you to do in terms of moving those assets into the next opportunity? You know, I will say this. I happen to be located near one of our major sports franchises in this area. And so many young men come in to see me about wanting to get into business. Those young men are making a lot of money. And one of the things I've always said to them is that, you know, what's your next career going to be? Now, I understand what your job is now, but what is your next career going to be? And that is to look beyond what you're doing out there on that field, but to look at what that next career is going to be. How do you maximize the dollars that you're making? But it's the same thing with all of you. Always have a vision, looking ahead to decide what it is you're going to do next, but work to be the best that you can be in all that you do, okay? Decide what's going to make you rise above everybody else who's out there in the same space. You know, for us, all I said was, we're going to have the best service component in this market. That's the only thing that I knew that would separate us from some of the other BMW dealers in the marketplace. So we worked as hard as we could to be the best that we can be, because that allows you to get the maximum out of your operation, to get the multiples that you need to maximize the dollars that you're making. So I say to all of you, in terms of whatever space you're in today, whatever business you're in, make sure that you're doing the very best job you can to make every dime pay you a dividend and a return when you get ready to move to the next business.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to say that there are some exceptions to the rule about having family come work for you.
I have a son who's doing a wonderful job for me right now.
I spoke at the Black Enterprise Summit last week in Charlotte, where I'm building a $1.5 billion development in downtown Charlotte. And I talked about building wealth as African Americans. And so my daughter runs track, and she does a 4x1 relay. So I equate it to building a legacy to that. So you got 4 people running that, 4 legs. So the first leg runs with the baton and then hands it off to the second. The second one's got a little more speed to build up on the lead or catch up if necessary. And then the third keeps the pace, and then the fourth closes it out. So, but no one says, hey, we take that baton, after you run, the first leg runs, the second leg picks it up at the beginning of where the first leg started off, because there won't be any progress. So Donahue is the second leg, and he's faster, quicker, smarter than me. And he is a far better business person at 24 than I was at 30. And so I'm expecting, soon I'll be able to go with my wife and go out on the boat and enjoy some of this. Because the development business is like owning a boat, 2 happy days, the day you buy it and the day you sell it. But anyway, so there were the exceptions, and my daughter, Chloe, is super determined and is as tough as they come, and she's going to be a great partner to him, and so she'll, probably run part of the second with you and run a bit of the third. So, but anyway, I think that, and then, by the way, it's important that we teach our kids to be business people and to think bigger and that accept and hope that they are going to be better at it than I am. I see that as a great sense of pride. My biggest accomplishments in this living on this world will be the 2 children that I leave behind, and they're both going to be great people. Clearly, there's a great one right here, though. So, in terms of what do I do to find deals? We look everywhere. I talk to everybody. There are people in this room who've met me, and we email together. I'm not too busy for anybody. I'm not any better than anybody else. My grandfather that I'm named after was a janitor in a public school system in rural Virginia where my father and his sisters couldn't go to school. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was a hotel doorman at the Wardman Park Marriott, and I owned a Marriott in this city for nearly 20 years. My father was an auto mechanic. And so I loved and respected those 3 men as much as anybody else in this world, probably more so. And so never being too busy, never being too good, never being above it, but being willing to listen and to encourage other people to pursue their dreams. And every now and then, their dream is going to intersect with yours, and you'll do some business together. My dear friend Scott Bolden, who just walked in here, we talk about doing business with each other. I met Scott Bolden when I was early in my career. I was 31, 32. He had just come here from New York. He was a prosecutor in New York and was working at a law firm here in D.C., Reed Smith, and he was an associate. And he talked so well, I gave him all my business. And I gave him my business. I went to other developers and convinced them to give him their business. And fast forward, I think it took you maybe 5 years. You were partner. 4. Thank you. 4 years. And then how long did it take to become managing partner? But he's managing partner of the firm as well. And we've been friends ever since. And so it's about empowering people. And then he brings deals to us. And so we look at, we get our deals from many different places. And it's all about communicating, having a willingness to listen and a willingness to give. And so we're going to help anybody we can as well. And then in terms of raising capital, that's the biggest challenge. We were recently awarded with a good friend of mine, Victor McFarlane, who has run and owned the largest African-American real estate private equity fund in the country. We joined forces last year to bid on a site in downtown Los Angeles, and we were awarded it in December. We're building the tallest building in the western United States, 1,060 feet. $1.2 billion cost. So those kinds of scales of projects require a tremendous amount of capital. And so we raise our capital from so many different places. But it's a lot more difficult for us and say our non-minority counterparts who can pick up the phone and call relationships, and they get 9 lives, they can go bankrupt and other stuff and keep doing deals. And so we got to keep going around and knocking on every door. So we just know that couple things. One, we don't take no for an answer, and we just keep looking. If one door closes, we knock on another door. If they don't answer, we knock on another door. And then the other thing is that, like Tom just mentioned, you've got to be. I'd like to say we're the best at what we do. We specialize in large-scale public-private development, mixed-use projects, And I think we do that better than anyone else that we compete with. I've been a student of the business for 40 years nearly. And the culture in our company is that we are focused on excellence. Because with excellence and great deals, while it may be harder, you'll attract capital because capital will come to great businesses, great entrepreneurs, talented people who have a high ethical standard. And I think that's the other thing, is that our word needs to mean something. We need to perform. We need to operate with integrity and operate above the fray. I learned that because, growing up in starting my business in D.C., and then, seeing, black political leaders becoming targets. I had the FBI come visit me when I was 23, 24 years old to talk to me about the mayor of our city. And so I realized that I would be a target. And so I operated on that basis. And so it taught me another discipline about not cutting corners, dotting our I's and crossing our T's. And so a big part of raising capital as a black business person is an unblemished career. Sadly, that is the case, but an unblemished career, high ethical standards, and being tenacious. That would be and that's how we've done it for 35 years.
Just one thing I want, and this came from my uncle, who was a minister that raised me, helped raise me, I should say, and he said, it doesn't matter about all of the good things you do. If you make one mistake, it's like a pebble hitting the water. When it hits, it creates ripples and circles, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So integrity, working as hard as you can, being the best that you can be, okay, is what allows people to come to you. I didn't have to go to some of those franchises that wouldn't give us an opportunity many years ago. They came to me because of our performance. But I also, too, want to say thank you to all my bosses who are here today. Because when I look out and see all of you that bought product from us, okay, we work for you, and without you, we might as well lock our doors. So I thank all of you, okay, including that young fellow you just talked about over there, who has also been a great boss of mine.
Thank you. So we have time for a few audience questions. Laurel's going to...
Don and my frat brother here are super successful. But my question is about who you do business with, who look like us, think like us, and act like us. Because your wealth building and your success is important to your industry, but it's also important to the vendors that you use. Don's absolutely right. I made partner for 4 years, and I would not have been partner at a major law firm without Don's business and his push. I mean that. You're supposed to clap right there. I'm not a great black lawyer at a big law firm. I'm a great lawyer who happens to be African American. Don't let them qualify you like that. But my point is that the power of your wealth and success can be extended to the vendors you use. You make them successful. And that's as important as the success in your industry. I know you do business with vendors, lawyers, accountants, suppliers who are African American, not because they're African American, because they're good and they happen to be African American. Don, obviously my story speaks for itself with you. Can you all both talk about the importance of doing business with qualified vendors who happen to be African American, not black vendors just because they're black? Because I think there's a misconception out here, not amongst this crowd per se, but about all people, including people that don't look like us. Could you all comment on that? Thanks.
Well, there are a number of individuals in this room here who are individuals that I have worked with and that have come along. But I gave the example of Bronson Cooper here. And okay.
I don't know. Oh, there we go. All right. So look, I talked about Scott, but as I said earlier, we as a company, on every project we do, we commit to at least a threshold of 35% all contracts across the board. So that means consultants, lawyers, of course, and we the most qualified firms, period. And we just look for and include an environment of diversity as we go and search. But we look for the most qualified, most talented firms. And as a result of that, that's why our projects have been very successful. Our Courtyard by Marriott, I bought the building from the RTC. You actually helped do the transaction in 1994, the year he was born. And then we built Courtyard Marriott in 1999, which got turned down by Marriott until I got John Marriott to walk the building and look at it. It ended up being the top performing Courtyard, one of the top 5 in their system worldwide every year it was open. Every year it was open and owned by me. It had an African-American general manager. The first African-American general manager, she's a woman. She left. She did such a good job. She went to manage a larger property by Marriott, because ours is about 200 keys. And then managed by Thomas, who started off in the restaurant in the hotel and became a front desk attendant, and then within 5 years ended up running the hotel. He happens to also be the chairman of the Greater Washington, D.C. Hotel Association, and it's a top performer because he's the best manager in that category in the country, or in the world for that matter. So it's about diversity makes projects better. And you're right, there's a misnomer that, especially I used to confront that in D.C. a lot, where people say, oh, it's going to cost more to have diversity, or the product is going to be less successful. But diversity brings in more people into the process. And if you bring in more talent, you get a better product. And so what we have made a career of doing is proving that diversity results in a better product. Every hotel I've owned has been run by an African-American general manager. My Royal Palm Hotel in South Beach, second largest hotel in South Beach, when I sold it, it sold for the highest price ever of a hotel in Miami-Dade. And that was because we had a talented general manager. So it's about being the best and then providing environments of opportunity. So we look for the best, like you. I mean, you were, as I said, no one could convince me more than you could. I mean, no one could talk more, and no one could be more in communicating than you. So, and if I got in trouble, you would have got into criminal law too. So, because if I had my life on the line, you'd be my man, because you're very good at what you do. So that's what we do. And I think I think you made such an important point about how diversity is dental, but it's just creating an environment of fairness. And by the way, and if this country had an environment of fairness, you would find much greater diversity if the doors of opportunity were open to everybody.
Hi, my name is Jordan Rose, and I'm a law student at NYU and a summer associate at Reed Smith, right over there, across the street. Black and brown bodies are notorious for being financially illiterate. And so I was wondering if you all could talk about the importance of financial literacy, especially for those black and brown persons who, when they graduate higher education, will be welcomed with amounts of money that they've never seen before, and avenues in which that they could find places that can offer them some guidance as to how to manage their money effectively and to build not richness but wealth.
Okay. So, I think starting off with financial literacy, I mean, we have to talk about money. I mean, we got to talk to our kids about money. And also, we got to, look, I have this argument with the Democratic Party, and I don't like to bring politics into it, but, we are focused. I'll never forget. I was on Bill Clinton's finance committee when he ran for president, got you to support him, and then was a corporate co-chair of his inauguration. And I kept getting invited to different things at the White House, but they all were geared towards African Americans. And I'll never forget, I got an invitation from the White House to watch the ceremony of him signing the welfare to work legislation. And so I called up one of the key people, in his administration, and I said, there must have been some mistake. I'm a business person. Why would I want to come to a ceremony taking away one of the few safety nets left for black people, and that will perpetuate this untrue perception of our community that we don't want to work? I'm a business person, so invite me to financial things. You want to sign an economic bill or support global entrepreneurship or the like, please invite me, but don't ever invite me again, anything like this. And I think that was the last time I went to the White House until it was me, okay? Now, fast forward, of course, Barack Obama had me at his economic forum, his jobs forum, and so many other things because he saw me differently. But people in politics place us as a social agenda. And our agenda is not social, it's economic and education. So we got to be prepared to talk to our kids about economics and explain to them about economics. And so raising Donahue and raising our daughter, we have business discussions at the table. We have political discussions at the table. I encourage both of them to challenge me on my thinking, and to give me responses to business solutions. I've got a business issue, a business problem. We talk about it from time to time, so they understood it. And so it's critical that we train our kids to think about how to build wealth, because if life were a race and it was the Indianapolis 500, white Americans are they start off on lap 400, and we start off on lap 1. And so if we got drivers, so we're driver B, white America's driver A. Now, America is telling us today that we're both driving Lamborghinis, and they're the same speed, and driver B has had to, in order to get into the race, has had to be twice as good as driver A. And the rules are the same for us both. The road is paved evenly on both lanes. And so it's all meritorious, and we're in a meritocracy now. And so we should win, no matter, it's fair. But what they leave out is we're starting off on lap 1, and everybody else starts off on lap 400. So even if the car breaks down, they have a wreck, the guy has a heart attack, et cetera, they got time to recover. We don't. So the idea here is that we've got to say that this is a long-term plan. And so educating our kids to think beyond their ages. There is a reason that Donahue at 24 is overseeing the development of the SLS Hotel here. That's a $150 million project, because he's capable of doing it, because he's been trained to do it a very long time. So it's having those discussions and helping them grow up quickly in a different space, but not being afraid to talk about money and not being afraid or uncomfortable in the pursuit of it. Warren Buffett told this story, and he tells it every year at the Forbes Summit. He says that his wife used to pester him about giving away money when he was worth, tens of millions and then hundreds of millions. And he said, look, I'm not giving away any money because I multiply the money quicker. And so I'm not going to give away millions or tens of millions. She said, oh, you got to give it away. And he says, look, I'll make a deal with you. Leave me alone, and I'll give away billions later. We'll give it all away. We'll give away billions. And so he focused all his energy on building wealth. Then he said, okay, now that I'm wealthy and I'm ahead of everybody else, essentially, then now back. So we, on the other hand, we spend a lot of time talking about giving back, and we should, but we should be giving back in a way that's propelling upward mobility and building our business, being almost single-mindedly focused on growing wealth, generational wealth, so we can catch up.
That was really great. So give him a hand. You know, the thing that happens with us is when I was chair of our National Association of Minority Automobile Dealers, you know, we were going to the manufacturers, and I'll just give you an example. Mercedes-Benz, we walk in to see them, and we talked about having more opportunities. First thing that the chairman said to me was that, first of all, if you can bring me, Tom, if you can bring me 10 individuals who can afford to buy land and building and can afford to pay Blue Sky on an average about $30 million per store, then I will give you 10 franchises. I walked out of that office, but before walking out, I said to him, if you level the playing field, we can perform just like everyone else. I will bring you qualified individuals. We left there, went out, and tried to recruit as many individuals as we could. We put them into a program called the Next Generation Program, where we train them at the level of being, you know, new car managers, general managers, used car managers. And I think if you look around in this room, there are quite a few individuals who look like me that now work in my store. I've had individuals to walk in my store and said it was too dark, or there was too many of us, okay? What I've also said is, it's not important who owns the store. What is important is the level of performance of that store. So always remember, it's about making money, not about sticking your chest out, not about being the sheriff that walks through the place, not about driving a big fancy car. You know, for a long time, there were people who didn't know that I owned Rolls Royce. I never drove one. In fact, my wife and I drove Minis most of the time. That was the car of choice. Whenever someone would ask us, what do you drive? It would either be a Mini or a 5 Series BMW. So I say that because there are times when people won't do business with you if they think you feel like, and you are making too much money. So what I'm saying is that let's train for that next opportunity so this young lady will have an opportunity when she comes out of school, and when she helps, and any help that she gets to put her funds together, that she will have an opportunity to achieve that dream of ownership in her own business one day. And I truly hope you get that.
Krista Rutherford, Leadership Development Coach and Trainer. What foundational books do you have that discuss the foundational principles of success, and what are you reading now?
I wrote 2 books, the Peebles Principles and the Peebles Path to Real Estate Wealth. So I would recommend those, obviously. And there's copies of them. Okay, thank you. And the book that I read, frankly, throws people off. I'd say one of the most interesting books that I've read recently is a $40 Million Slave. And that's a interesting, anybody read that? Okay. It's about African American athletes and the history of African American athleticism and and the role of black athletes and the challenges of black athletes. And by the way, just think about it, horse racing, the top jockeys, 150 years ago were black. And so that was a book that, I would say that, recently, the one that inspired me the most would have been Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? Yeah, right.
My wife always says that everything that I read is all about the car business and business. And Quite the Best was one of those books that I read that I passed around. Raven Fans is another one that I have passed around to my staff. What we do is, and I've provided for the staff, audiobooks that we want them to read and report back in a staff meeting chapters that they've read and what did it really mean to them to help us move to the next level. So what we do, and Woods, who is one of the individuals who generally brings to the staff the various books that he wants us to focus on. And what we're saying is we're looking at books that's going to help our managers understand what it means to be the best that they can be. And in each of those, it's about getting their understanding of what they've read and interpreting that to us in a way that we then put it into practice within our organization. So my wife is happy of our success, but it is truly because of what we do with Mr. Woods and his program that he puts in our store, and I want to thank him.
Hello, my name is Donna Dowdy. I just missed A. Scott Bolden. I actually know him, but I didn't get a chance to say hello to him. I know him through Mayor Williams. I used to be Mayor Williams' secretary. You said some things that was very profound, and I wish I had heard this like years ago. I'm a former real estate investor. I purchased properties throughout DC. And I owned a clothing store on both U Street and in Catholic University area. I got really close to hospitality, but they were a bunch of rooming houses. But I did recognize something as I lost some, sold some, and closed stores and things of that nature. What I learned is that I shouldn't have tried to do it alone. I did all of it alone. Opened the store up with no money, brought in a bunch of designers and had them, invest in sections of the store, and so I didn't have to put up any money to open the store. But just to get down to the nuts and bolts of things, now that things are kind of, I have a clear path to kind of rejuvenate myself, I noticed that you mentioned we should come together as a group, and that's the problem. We really don't stick together. We have people in here tonight who could come together and purchase a small hotel just to get started. But if I were to ask you if you knew of any small, and I know this is a very forward question, if I was to ask you of any small coalitions or investment groups that we could approach, what would they be or who would they be?
You can approach us.
Uh-oh.
Okay. I say that, and I'm sure Don would say the same. There are a couple of groups out here that we can steer you in the right direction to tap in. Some of them have a threshold that they won't take below a certain amount. And others will say, oh, no, we'll take small groups, bring them together. It all depends on how much funds you really, really have. But it will help you to get started. Afterwards, I'll give you my card. We will do everything that we can to help, and we'll try and steer you in the right direction.
God bless you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I agree.
I'm sorry. Allow him to answer. I'm sorry. Forgive me. I was just so overwhelmed by his kindness and his munificence. I forgot.
Oh, no, I concur.
Okay, great. Thank you for your kindness.
Hi, I'm Joe St. George, and I'm a general counsel of a global cement company, attorney by trade, and also the legal redress chair for the NAACP and a member of the National Bar Association. And my question is on behalf of all the lawyers that may be in this room. What can the legal industry, specifically black lawyers, do to better engage with our black businesses? When I started law school and graduated, I was associate at the largest and oldest black law firm, Arnell and Hastie, which no longer exists. We're 20 years later, there isn't a national black law firm other than Johnny Cochran's firm on the plaintiff side, but nothing on the business side, major. And there is not a lot of advocacy around supporting minority lawyers of color in the business space at the big firms and so forth. And so we're losing our top lawyers who are not getting the opportunities to become real estate lawyers like myself, M&A lawyers. There's so few of us. What can we do? What can be done in the business space of you entrepreneurs, you leaders, to help grow up the next crop? Because if we don't have a next crop of M&A lawyers, real estate lawyers, securities lawyers, we're in trouble. Because without us, there's a lot of work that can't be done, and because there isn't that synergy that we need to have, we're not as far as I think we could be, but for the lack of lawyers. So if you could give me some direction on what we can do better to engage with the business community.
Look, I think that a business, it's having a wide spectrum of skill set, but more importantly, again, there were some very powerful black law firms, Lewis, White and Clay in Boston, Left, Moore and Douglas here in D.C., several Hudson, Leftwich, Davenport, a bunch of different. They were black law firms. There was a reason for that, though, because the municipal governments around the country were multi-billion-dollar organizations that were borrowing money in the public sector, and those mayors said to the underwriters, we want diversity in terms of underwriters, so co-underwriters, so minority investment firms like Ariel Capital, like Loop Capital, and like Bernard Beal firm and so forth. And they also said that they want to see bond counsel as African American firms. So they were demanding that in order to have access to their business, the rules were you had to, again, large firms had to engage in hiring firms of diversity. And so that was the environment. However, after the assault on African American political leaders who were rocking the boat, for example, the SEC, the large investment banking firms went to the SEC, as you may know, and convinced to institute a rule prohibiting contributions to municipal level political officials who could potentially have oversight on making investment decisions. And if you did it, you were barred from doing business with that municipality for 2 years. So it discouraged wealthy African Americans in that space from supporting black politicians. And so there was an effort to stop this because it was changing. The same thing with the law firms. It took away their ability to get engaged politically. And so we got this next generation, this post-racial political leadership. I'll never forget, and I'm sure there's some friends of his in here, I watched Adrian Fenty on television say that we can't make business decisions as a government based upon race. When you get into picking companies and businesses to do business with us based on race, that's when you get in trouble. Well, my view, of course, is when you ignore it, that's when we lose progress. And so the reason why, and by the way, the government happens to be the big issuer of financial instruments in the planet, by the way. And so if they don't set the rules, then it doesn't create the environment. And so law firms, back in the 1980s, 1990s, law firms were hiring black associates, moving them to partners. They were bidding to get top lawyers like Weldon Latham and others to come to their firms. They were, the investment banking firms were hiring former government officials who were African American to go into municipal bonds and other areas of business. And then they were sending business to other black firms and the like. And that set a culture. Today, there's no impetus for that. And so, sadly, there are not enough black businesses to support an industry of black lawyers. The majority community has to be willing to do business with us. But it's a bit different. Look, if you want to, argue that I know I'm losing. Okay, hard for people to say that qualified people couldn't go to the same schools, or that we couldn't eat in the same restaurants as long as we could afford to pay, or use the same bathrooms. Everybody's kind of say, okay, that's fair, etc. But people don't want to give up their money, right? So they're not interested in, affirmative action, or any kind of parity when it comes to their money. And so, but business is efficient. And so we will figure out how to prosper under any set of rules. So if the rules are that diversity is important, then you'll see that. But that's going to require a re-engagement of your generation in the political process to expect that, because that's a big part of where the opportunity is going to be. You got to change the culture of what Scott just said, was that he's a great lawyer. Black.
But regretfully, our own businesses that are big businesses, I've been at big firms, and I see our businesses doing business with the majority firms, but they're not putting our lawyers on that work. And what I have found is often that our business owners that are doing the, couple $1 billion deals are not demanding that the minority or the majority firms put lawyers on that look like themselves. And I think that might have to do with them not knowing that we even exist. And that's why I was asking about the engagement piece. How do we engage with individuals like yourself who are doing the big deals? Because they do exist. I've seen them myself on both sides of the table. And we just have an engagement issue. And so I was curious if you had any ideas on how we can better engage.
Teaching out. I mean, look, last week I met a patent lawyer who's now in Charlotte, who's now doing some work for us on a patent for our company. I meet people in here and we do business. It's engaging, letting us know that you're out there. I think it's more on the lawyers as well to let them know. And I think also, as we said, and Tom is going to talk about this as well, I'm sure, is that it needs to be important for all of us to understand that we are creating environments of opportunity, and that it's up to us to insist that there be equity in opportunity, presentation of opportunity.
I agree. And the other thing, look out at associations, like in our case, our National Association of Minority Automobile Dealers. Now, we hire lawyers across the board for various things that we do, but working with us, because we're going out to try to get the best talent that we can find. But if you look at what we're doing and you start to work with us, it gives you an opportunity to develop a niche. Then you can take that one and move it to the next group that's similar to us, okay? We tend to pass the word around, this is the best law firm to deal with. This is the best group of African Americans you would want to deal with. And as we do that, then you start to get more business. We are in a similar situation now with regard to getting individuals to work with the various OEMs, I should say automotive distributors, getting them to work with them and requesting that they, through reporting to us every year at our annual meeting, the progress of diversity within the company. What is it that you're doing? How many of our people are you really hiring? And what does it truly mean within your organization? By requesting that they come and work with us that way and report out like that, they have an obligation to make sure and to try to keep us quiet, because that's really all they're really trying to do. But even trying to keep us quiet is giving opportunities to organizations like yours and others, because they know that we would start reporting out that if you don't start doing business with us, perhaps we should say to them that they shouldn't buy your product. I will say this, and I normally wouldn't do this, but there are two brands that we have no representation, and we buy a lot of their product. And the thing that we've said to them is that if we did a report out or a report card to all of the people out in this country who are African Americans that's buying your product, it would hurt you. They don't see that or believe that on time. We have been saying for the last 2 or 3 years, and I have a couple of members who are here, that we're probably going to have to put out a report card to let individuals know, the companies that feel like we can be consumers of their brand, but we cannot sell their brand. So if we can't sell your brand, maybe we shouldn't even be buying your brand. So what we found is the best way to go in to present to them is to go in and show them concretely by region of the country how much we really buy, because that's the only thing they really understand is the dollar. So as we begin to work together, it will help more organizations like yours, which are the black lawyers across this country, and the black accountants across this country, and the black engineers across this country. All of it, all of those organizations needs to. And I won't call names on the company that won't give us an opportunity, because I know some of you are driving those products and you're happy, okay?
So first, I've owned a Mini Cooper. I currently own a BMW. So you have set the bar that my next car will be a Rolls Royce, and I'll buy it from you. So for my question, in the industries that you all have talked about, which is real estate, you talked about car dealerships, and you talked about hospitality in terms of like Marriott's and that caliber. African American women are highly underrepresented in those industries in ownership and in leadership. So 2 parts of the question. 1, do you mentor African American women to excel in those industries? And 2, how can African American women excel and become owners of these types of industries?
Right now, they're getting more opportunities than those of us of color are getting, which is a good thing because we're pushing hard to get more females, and particularly African-American females, in our space. Now, we just had a young lady, Pam Rogers, who just retired after 28 years being a GM Chevrolet dealer. And we have a young lady now who is a Mercedes dealer whose dad actually was the first African-American to get a Mercedes franchise in Centerville, Ohio. And Nell is, she's here a lot, okay, participating in various functions. But she is doing a great job of trying to carry the mantle for women, certainly in the auto industry. What we really need is to get more women into it. And because of the amount of hours that's required, it's extremely hard on women. And that's one of the unfortunate things, but it's not just hard on males as well. Your family life really struggles because of the amount of hours you put in. You're working 6 and 7 days a week. But that doesn't necessarily just happen in the auto industry. It happens in all of our businesses because when we're starting out, we put in a lot of hours in our businesses, and I'm sure you'll be putting in a lot in yours. So always think about it's the hard work that you put in, the skill set that you bring to your business, and all of the things that you keep thinking about that you accomplish to be successful, to keep bringing others along. But we are going to continue to work on trying to get more African-American females into table to be able to become dealers.
Look, I was raised by a black woman who had and taught the real estate business initially by a black woman. So I watched my mother had me at 19 years old, and then worked as a secretary, and then ultimately got her real estate sales license because she bought a house in Prince George's County and met the real estate sales agent for about 15, 20 minutes and saw how much she made when she signed the closing statement and said, well, if she did that little work for that much money, I'd like to do it too. And so she learned that business and got a broker's license and so forth. But every step of the way was a challenge. I mean, one, a challenge being a woman, but a black woman it's a very unique challenge. I mean, in terms of all the challenges that come with it. She, one, was responsible for raising me, which so many, of our women are left with the sole responsibility of raising their children. And it's because of her that I've tried to be the best father I could possibly be because of the lack of presence of my own. But I watched her. We were close in age. She had me at 19, so we were close in age. And as a teenager, we had a very different relationship where she talked to me about all the challenges and the, from sexual harassment would be illegal today to outright discrimination. And so I, as a result, am extremely sensitive about creating environments of opportunity. And so my view is that, one, African American women have to ignore, as we all do, the naysayers and those who discourage them from going out here and trying to be transformative, to break barriers and to change things and to build, a successful business, a successful career. But at the same hand, those of us who own businesses need to, practice the theory of giving people opportunities and putting them in positions, qualify people in positions to where they can be successful. So, for example, my hotel in Philadelphia is being, built by an African-American woman-owned general contractor, which is unusual. The co-architect for our $1.5 billion project in Charlotte, Zena Howard, is an African-American woman. So giving people fair opportunities. I mean, it's about, but I think it comes with a culture as well about respecting women, how we view them, how we see them, business owners or entrepreneurs or partners, and feeling this sense of fairness. I mean, but from a straight up business perspective, I know I'm going to get the most out of the two people I gave you examples of, because their opportunities come so few and far in between that they cannot afford to not excel. So from a business perspective, if we operate with the mindset that we want to hire the most dedicated, the hardest working, and the ones who value the opportunity the most, it'll send everyone to black women because, again, that's the challenge. But I think we have to not accept the barriers and the limitations that society imposes on us. And black women get a double hit of being black and the unfairness that is imposed upon women overall, and the role that our society wants to place women in and marginalizing them. And as a father of a daughter as well, I want to have an environment where my daughter can go out into the world and do whatever she wants based on her ability. And so it's up to me and anybody else for us to create that environment. So we try to do that every day.
My name is Troy Duffy. I'm a recent graduate of Howard University. I had the opportunity to grow up HU. I had the opportunity to grow up in Miami, Florida, and followed your careers very closely. I have very close ties to Overtown, where I know you guys have tried to do some projects. I love your analogy when you talk about the race, and you say African Americans start at lap 1 and everybody else is starting at lap 300. But where I disagree is that I think life goes into perpetuity. I think that the race doesn't have an ending, but I think we keep going. And so I've been thinking about, what is the best way to design basically a new car that not only allows us to compete at the same speed, but to push us past whoever's in front. And so if you guys could discuss your vision for the next generation of African Americans and what you see as the best way to thrust us past whoever we're competing with, whether it be on a global scale or on a scale within the United States. And then the best steps that young African American entrepreneurs can take to make that happen.
I've always said that business is a marathon, not a sprint. There are going to be ups and downs, and challenges along the way. It's all about how you meet those challenges that's going to take you to that next level. every industry has a different set of challenges, but they all are the basic skills and that you need to be successful in anything that you do. Going beyond where we are today involves, as Don noted, his son is doing a better job than he did. What we try to do is to make sure the Tim Woods of the world, okay, have a better skill set than the Tom Mooreheads of the world. What I hope is that the Tim Woods of the world or the Rory Browns of the world, okay, or the young Theo here, okay, those individuals are better skilled than we were when we started out. And what I've said to them is that they have to make sure that Matt, who Tim has been mentoring, is better than he is. And I charge each of them with that responsibility. Rory has to be able to make sure that they understand how to move product and to do it the way the big box companies do it that's in our industry. Because if Rory doesn't get that done, Matt will never get to the point where he's going to be able to keep moving it to the next level. So what Don was talking about was a 4x4 race. But that race will continue because the 4x4 is going to be run every year. But the time will get better because of better training, better conditioning, and that's what we have to provide to the young people in our organization in order for it to continue.
There are two phrases that I would say answer that and are my two favorite phrases. The first one is each setback is an opportunity in disguise. So all of us in life and in business are going to get hit, right? So if you fall down, you lose. But if you can keep your head and realize that the punch that was thrown at you left your opponent open, then you can knock him out. Because the counterpuncher is the most dangerous puncher. So each setback is an opportunity in disguise. The second one is what Henry Kissinger said about America. And so he said America has no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests. So think about that for a second. Black Americans have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, permanent interests. So if you operate with those two mindsets, we will have far greater progress. I will give you an example. We have a president that no one really expected, most people didn't expect to win. I actually predicted he would win. Not because he was qualified or any of the other stuff, but because of the political dynamics. So he wins. So we can say, for the most part, I would think most people would agree that that was a setback. But the opportunity was present. If we approach that Black Americans have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interest. So opportunity is a setback is he won. Opportunity is that he needs to engage and expand his support base and that he is transactional. Our agenda is economic empowerment, one of the keys. And so I challenge members of the Black Caucus to go over there and cut some deals with him to advance our cause, because he's in there for 4 years. So the Black agenda cannot stop and be put on hold for 4 or 8 years because somebody else won that we didn't expect and that the white progressives are up in arms about. We need to say we can't wait a second, a minute, a fraction of a second to advance our agenda. And so if you approach those kinds of circumstances like that, you will prosper. I mean, and they come in different ways. And so in order for us to move forward at a more rapid pace, we have, I believe, approach the environment consistently with those two principles and move our agenda forward. Because that's really what this is about. We got to move forward. It's a perpetual 4x4, but we've got to move it forward. And so imagine, by the way, all the big companies, all the big corporations, they're prospering right now, aren't they? They got lower taxes. They got to repatriate their money at a tax rate far lower than what they would have paid even on capital gains. They've gotten deregulations. The banks have gotten deregulations. Interest rates are rising. They're making more record profits. So imagine now all that progress is happening, and hey, we're just going to put it on hold for black people for 4 to 8 years and wait them out. So, I mean, that kind of thinking can't exist. We got to do business. We got to advance the cause. We got to advance the agenda.
Thank you. Let's give our two panelists a round of applause. I need to hear more. Come on. Come on. Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to tell you about 3 of the benefits that I know will help me in school and life that I received from the Catalyst program. First, Catalyst introduced to me potential careers, and as I select a college, I'm better able to pick colleges matching my interest and career choices. I enjoyed meeting all the professionals and hearing their story of how they got to be where they are today. Second, the summer program of Catalyst introduced me to the importance of the soft skills that are important to any successful professional. In the program, I have learned skills that are used in many businesses and work life, such as writing a resume, formatting emails, and making elevator pitches. Third, Catalyst has helped me to build a network. In addition to the Catalyst staff and instructors who are now a part of my team, I have a student peer group outside of school that is an important personal resource. My Catalyst friends and I are in touch and try to help each other. Thank you, Catalyst, for placing me in the Catalyst program, and thank you, Catalyst, for helping me prepare for life after high school. In closing, let me also thank all of you for supporting Catalyst.